The Forgotten Guardian and the Veils of Time. In the previous episode, Alexander and Helena, guided by the mystical little deer, entered a sacred grotto where time folded back upon itself, revealing the font of memories with Excalibur resting in luminescent depths that obeyed none of the physics either of them had ever known. In the presence of the ancestor, a warrior whose eyes carried centuries of battles won and an existential anguish that no victory had ever resolved, they discovered truths that reorganized everything they believed they understood. The sword does not choose the strongest, but the one who has learned to vibrate at the frequency of justice tempered by compassion. Helena witnessed, in a vision she still holds in sacred silence, the destiny of a distant descendant wielding Excalibur in times of absolute shadow. And Alexander underwent the only trial no previous battle could ever have granted him. He learned to surrender so completely to himself that the separation between seeker and sought dissolved entirely, and the sword recognized in the blood of the one who called to it the echo of the warrior who had kept it. Now they return. But what they will find upon reaching the shore is not the camp they left behind. It is proof that Thule has operated upon all of them, each in its own way, through currents of time that ran in parallel without anyone knowing they were running. In this new episode, we will discover together how the return to camp will reveal a temporal fracture that no one had anticipated. Sostratus, keeping solitary vigil before a fire burning with an intensity impossible for something that should have extinguished itself days ago, and who believes with absolute certainty that only a single night has passed. While the group lived through days of journey and transformation, he experienced hours. Both realities are true. This is the first evidence that Thule did not merely fold time for those who entered its interior. It created parallel temporal currents for each group with deliberate purpose. The crew of the Aletheia, they will discover, faced their own 3 days of ordeal, a beast from the depths that did not come to destroy, but to judge. And Sostratus, in his solitary vigil, received a visitor none of the others could ever have imagined. A man who emerged from the mist, carrying impossible provisions and stories of ancestral battles, who departed without revealing his name, and who bore an extraordinary resemblance to Alexander. During the voyage back to Amesbury, the group will integrate their transformations, and Nevum will reveal the details surrounding the font of memories, the dimensional portal where Alexander will have the opportunity to use the sacred vibration he has learned, and to speak aloud the name that will call Excalibur across the centuries. The next phase of the journey is opening, and what opens cannot be closed. The return and the unsettling discovery. Something was wrong with the camp. Wrong in the sense that Thule had taught them to recognize, not dangerous, but deliberate. A sign that something had been orchestrated without anyone having been asked permission to orchestrate it. Thule's morning mist was dissipating with that specific slowness of mists that are not simply evaporating but retreating, like curtains drawing open after a performance that was precisely what it intended to be. Alexander, Helena, and their companions descended back toward the shore in a silence that carried the specific weight of people who had experienced things for which they did not yet have adequate words, and who therefore preferred silence to inadequate approximation. Each step echoed not only in the compacted snow beneath their boots, but in that deeper place Thule had opened within each of them, that interior territory where perceptions arrive not as information, but as certainty before any conscious thought can intermediate their reception. The air was saturated with a stillness that transcended mere physical silence. It was the stillness of a place that exists between worlds, a land that did not belong entirely to the consensual reality most mortals inhabit without ever noticing its borders. It was when they rounded the familiar rock formation and the view opened onto the shore where the Aletheia remained anchored that Alexander felt the first shiver traverse his spine, not from cold, but from an incomprehension that was simultaneously intellectual and visceral, the body perceiving before the mind had finished processing. There, exactly where they had departed. Or was it where they believed they had departed? A fire burned with an intensity impossible for something that should have extinguished itself days ago. Flames dancing against a gray sky with that specific joy of things that do not obey the laws they should obey, as though they knew they were impossible and found in that fact not a problem, but a freedom. And before that eternal fire, seated upon a stone in a posture of meditation so deep that his body seemed to have reached an agreement with stillness, sat Sostrato. The loyal companion remained completely motionless, eyes fixed upon the flames with that concentration belonging to states where time ceases to flow linearly and begins to exist in overlapping layers. His breathing was so slow and controlled that he seemed to have entered something that was not exactly sleep, not exactly wakefulness, but that intermediate state which certain traditions know by name and which Thule had apparently induced with the precision of one who knows exactly what they are doing. Alexander stopped completely, and then understanding arrived with the specific force of revelations that do not come gradually but all at once, carrying the full gravity of what they imply. At no moment during the entire journey through the mountain, through the enchanted grotto, drinking from the sacred waters, witnessing transformations, keeping vigil beneath the aurora borealis, had Sostrato been present. How was it possible? How had all of them failed to notice his absence? "By the gods!" Alexander exclaimed, his voice breaking with a mixture of guilt and astonishment that were the same emotion expressing itself through different channels. How did we depart and live through everything our eyes witnessed without realizing that Sostrato was not walking beside us? Helena placed her hand upon Alexander's arm, feeling the tension in his muscles with that specific familiarity of one who knows the quality of every tension in the person they love, recognizing that this particular tension was the kind that comes from responsibility, not from fear. She too was processing the same revelation, memories being frantically searched for some moment in which they had noticed or questioned Sostrato's absence, and finding only voids where those memories should have been, like a book with pages torn out by an invisible hand, so carefully that the remaining pages gave no indication of what was missing. And to you who accompanies this crossing, who enters with us this territory where time is not a straight line, but a web of currents that can flow at different speeds without those within each current knowing of the others, I offer a simple but essential request. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave your comments sharing what you feel, what you see, what this narrative awakens in depths where reason rarely reaches. Each gesture of yours is a flame that joins the others, strengthening the invisible current that unites hearts across time and across the mysteries that await revelation. In doing so, you do not merely support this work. You become part of this tapestry of light. The story continues, and it is your presence that keeps the fire alive. Makeda, Amina, Nevam, and Hale stopped abruptly as the sight of Sostrato registered in their consciousness, and each passed through the same process of shock and incomprehension, memories searched and finding only those same specific voids. Nevam, with his newly awakened druidic awareness that had already begun revealing patterns invisible to the others, was the first to articulate what he was understanding before the understanding was complete. Thule does not operate under common temporal laws. This place exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and it can segregate experience in such a way that different members of the same group live parallel realities without perceiving the divergence until the moment of reconvergence. A pause carrying the weight of a statement being formulated as it was being spoken, discovery happening within language rather than before it. Sostrato was not forgotten. He was deliberately kept in a separate temporal current for a purpose we do not yet fully understand. And the fire that still burns without consuming the wood beside it, that fire is no accident. It is an anchor. The encounter with the solitary guardian. Alexander approached Sostrato with steps that were not hesitant for lack of courage. They were hesitant because each step carried the weight of a guilt that had not yet found its correct form of expression. The distance between them seemed to stretch with that specific quality of journeys that are not merely physical, that pass through layers of reality folding and unfolding according to the interior state of the one traversing them. When he finally drew close enough to see the details of Sostrato's face, the beard slightly longer than it should have been after a single night, his eyes reflecting the flames with a meditative depth suggesting he had processed far more than the objective time of his absence would permit, Alexander felt the words lock within him with that particular quality of locking that happens when what must be said is too much for any sequence of syllables to contain adequately. He knelt, not as a leader, not as a captain, but as someone who recognizes, through the gesture of reducing his own height, that what stands before him deserves the most complete acknowledgement available. "Forgive me, my brother," Alexander began, his voice rough with an emotion that had been accumulating since the moment of recognition on the shore. "I do not know what to say after having left you here without realizing it. There is no justification for such negligence, no words that can repair the abandonment you must have felt when you realized we were departing without you, leaving you alone in this strange place." The words flowed now like a torrent that could not be dammed without greater cost than that of simply letting it run, carrying within it all the accumulated anguish. Alexander expected to find anger. He expected justified accusations. He expected, perhaps, the physical repudiation of one who had been betrayed in a way that the betrayal itself had not even been perceived as it occurred. What he found in Sostrato's expression was the last thing he had prepared himself to find. Absolute serenity, a calm that did not come from defeated resignation, but from a deep understanding of something Alexander could not yet fully grasp. Sostrato opened his eyes with that quality of opening belonging to those who had been waiting for the right moment to do so, not to those who had been startled. The smile that touched his lips was stripped of any trace of bitterness or resentment, not the smile of one who forgives because no other option remains, but of one who finds nothing to forgive. "You politely asked me to stay, Alexander," he said, with a quiet certainty that contrasted dramatically with the agitation Alexander felt within himself. "You explained to me that should something drastic occur, should an urgent need arise, one of you could call upon me for help. I accepted that responsibility willingly, understanding that my role was to remain here as guardian, as an anchor of stability while you explored deeper territories." The words fell upon Alexander like a balm and like an enigma. Was it possible that Alexander had truly asked Sostrato to remain, and that the memory of that request had been erased alongside the awareness of his absence? Or was Sostrato experiencing memories that had never occurred, implanted by forces that manipulated the very fabric of reality with a surgeon's precision? Alexander looked to Helena in search of confirmation or denial. She returned his gaze with an expression equally bewildered, the specific bewilderment of those who recognize that both explanations are equally impossible, and that, therefore, at least one of them must be true. Nevum stepped forward with that quality of advance belonging to those who sense that their specific function in that moment is to articulate what the others are feeling but cannot name. Thule may have created a bifurcation in the temporal line, he offered, with the caution of statements that are also discoveries being made in real time. It is possible that in one version of events, Alexander truly did ask Sostrato to stay. And in another version, the one we experienced, no such conversation ever took place. Both realities are equally valid, both coexist in overlapping layers of possibility, and Thule simply allowed each one to manifest for different participants. The explanation, which would have seemed absurd weeks before, now made sense with that specific naturalness of truths that arrive after sufficient experience has been gathered to prepare the ground for them. Alexander extended his hand to Sostrato, no longer as a plea for forgiveness, but as a gesture of recognition between equals who had shared an extraordinary experience, even if they had each lived radically different aspects of it. "How long did you remain seated here on this stone?" he asked, genuinely curious about what Sostratus' experience had been within his own temporal current. The question seemed simple, factual, grounded in an objective measurement of time. Sostratus' answer would reveal the first great fracture in the consensual reality they were all still attempting to maintain. He tilted his head with that specific tilt of one receiving a question that seems too obvious to need asking. "Only one night passed after you said your farewells, did it not?" he replied, with genuine confusion as to why Alexander would be asking. "You departed as the sun was beginning to set. I lit this fire, spent the night in meditation, and now you return with the dawn." Silence. The kind of silence that only exists when an impossible truth arrives with such certainty that the reality surrounding it seems to require a moment to reorganize itself around it. The revelation of the temporal veils. Only one night. Sostratus genuinely believed, with the unshakable certainty of one who does not speculate but reports, that only a single night had passed, and his body confirmed it, muscles carrying the stiffness of hours of stillness, not of days. "I believe at least a week has passed," murmured Alexander, his voice carrying not accusation but the astonishment of things that exceed any conceptual framework available to contain them. "We climbed mountains, entered enchanted grottos, drank from sacred springs, spent an entire night immersed in thermal waters watching an aurora borealis in a spectacle that lasted hours." He gestured toward his companions, seeking confirmation that he was not losing his mind, that his memories were real and not some collective dream induced by forces that manipulated perceptions with the same ease with which they manipulated time. Helena, Makita, Amina, Nevim, and Hale nodded in unison, each bearing upon their faces the visible marks of a prolonged journey, skin lightly burned by sun and wind, eyes that had witnessed wonders and terrors, posture that spoke of muscles tested by demanding climbs and long stretches of contemplative vigil. Yet Sostratus observed them with an expression of genuine perplexity, the perplexity of one receiving an account of another life entirely. For him, the sun had set. He had lit the fire, entered the meditative state he often sustained during night vigils, and then, what had seemed mere moments later, the sun had begun to rise and his companions were returning. There was no gap in his experience. There were no lost days, no unaccounted hours. His temporal current had been continuous, uninterrupted, linear in the way that theirs clearly had not been. Two realities, both true, having occurred in different layers of time that Thule had permitted to coexist without intersecting until this precise moment of reconvergence, like two parallel rivers that had run for days without knowledge of each other, meeting at last in the same estuary. Nevim approached the fire with that druidic attentiveness he had learned in the first hours after drinking the sacred water to direct toward the details that an ordinary gaze would pass over. The fire burned with constant intensity, showing no signs of diminishing, and the pile of wood beside it remained untouched, as though not a single log had been consumed despite what should have been a week of continuous burning. "This fire does not obey the natural laws of consumption," he observed, reverent admiration in the voice of one recognizing work accomplished with mastery. It was lit not merely with physical wood, but with mystical intention, perhaps by Thule itself, or by the entities that guard this place. Its purpose was not merely to keep Sostratus warm. It was to mark a point of temporal anchorage, a beacon that maintained connection between different currents of time even as they diverged dramatically in their speeds and directions. He passed his hand above the flames without touching them, feeling the heat, and something more subtle, something that a physical hand could not detect, but which his newly awakened druidic perception recognized as a vibration that transcended temperature. "So you truly lived through days of adventure while for me only one night passed?" asked Sostrato, and in his voice there was no resentment at having been left out. There was genuine fascination before the absolute strangeness of what had occurred. Alexander nodded, placing his hand on his companion's shoulder in a gesture of fraternity that was also recognition. "And I believe your role as guardian here, maintaining this point of anchorage, was as crucial as any transformation we experienced up there." There was a growing clarity in this understanding, that nothing of what had happened had been accidental or arbitrary, that every element had been orchestrated by intelligences operating at levels that mortal minds could barely grasp. "Without you keeping vigil here, perhaps we would not have been able to return. Perhaps we would have remained trapped in temporal pockets with no anchor to draw us back to linear continuity." A pause carrying the weight of a statement that dissolved the guilt he had carried since the moment of recognition. "You were not abandoned, Sostrato. You were entrusted with a mission that required a different kind of strength of character, but an equally essential one." Helena looked toward the Aletheia anchored in the calm waters beyond the shore, with that specific feeling that further revelations would be waiting when they boarded. That intuition which does not speculate but perceives, the perceptual equivalent of the scent of rain before the rain arrives. She could feel layers of mystery still unfolded, secrets that Thule held, and that would only be revealed gradually, at the right time and in the right manner. "We need to return to the ship," she said softly, with an urgency that was not panic, but an intuitive understanding that they had remained in Thule long enough, that the island had granted its blessings and revelations, and that the time had come to depart before prolonged presence brought consequences they would prefer to avoid. Islands possessed of sufficient consciousness to manipulate time are also possessed of sufficient consciousness to have preferences about when their guests take their leave. And there was in the quality of the silence around them something that suggested the island, gently but clearly, was indicating the direction of the exit. The awakening of the sleeping crew. The deck of the Aletheia looked at first glance like the scene of a battle with no visible enemy, and then, more precisely, like the scene of a collective capitulation to something that had left no physical marks. When they stepped aboard, the sight that revealed itself was as disturbing as the discovery of Sostrato before the eternal fire, but with a different quality of disturbance. Not the strangeness of the inexplicable, but the specific terror of what is immediately recognized as a threat to life, even when the exact form of the threat is not yet clear. The entire crew was scattered across the deck in positions suggesting they had fallen where they stood, like marionettes whose strings had been cut abruptly by a hand that had not troubled itself with the elegance of the fall. They were not simply sleeping the natural sleep of men exhausted after watches. They were submerged in a torpor of such depth that their nearly imperceptible breathing and their faces, pale as marble, confirmed it as something far beyond ordinary rest. Alexander felt an icy terror close around his heart with the specific quality of terror that does not cry out but freezes, the terror of one who sees what might have happened to those left behind. "They are alive," Nevum declared quickly, kneeling beside the nearest sailor with the urgency of those who know that each second of correct diagnosis is worth more than hours of incorrect treatment. Fingers at the throat, counting the pulse with a concentration that excluded everything around him. The heart beats, though more slowly than normal. They are breathing, though shallowly. This is not death, nor any common illness. It is induced sleep, mystical sleep of a kind I have seen referenced in ancient Druidic texts. He raised his eyes to Alexander with an expression that was simultaneously diagnosis and situational assessment. Someone, or something, placed them in this state, most likely to protect them from experiences their minds were not prepared to process. The protection carries this paradox. It resembles harm before one understands what was being protected. Alexander began moving from sailor to sailor. Makita brought cold seawater. Hale placed hands upon foreheads with the attentiveness of those who have learned that healing is not only physical. Amina intoned chants in a tongue that carried within it sounds more than physical sounds can carry. And gradually, with that specific slowness of restorations that cannot be hastened without cost, the sailors began to wake. It was like watching stone statues transform back into living flesh. First, a tremor at the eyelids, then breathing that grew deeper and more regular. Finally, low groans of confusion as consciousness returned from whatever abyss it had been plunged into. Their eyes, when they finally opened, were glazed with that specific disorientation of those who wake into a reality they do not recognize as the same one in which they fell asleep. Looking around the familiar deck as though seeing it for the first time, as though they had slept and awakened in a world that had reorganized itself during their absence. The first sailor to manage sitting upright seized Alexander's arm with desperate force, fingers digging into flesh with the urgency of one who needs to confirm that what he is touching is real. "How long?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "How long were we sleeping?" The memories blur together with dreams I cannot distinguish from reality. Alexander helped him to his feet, supporting his weight until trembling legs found their balance. "Easy," he said with a gentleness that contrasted with the urgency he felt. "You are safe now. You are awake. But we need you to tell us what happened here while we were away." The other sailors emerged gradually from their torpor, each passing through the same confused process of reorientation, attempting to separate memory from dream, wakefulness from unconsciousness, past from present, with that specific difficulty of those trying to reconstruct a sequence of events experienced in a liminal state. Then, one of the older sailors, a gray-bearded man who had served on dozens of dangerous expeditions and who rarely showed fear with more than a tightening of the jaw, began to tremble violently. Not from cold, but with that trembling which comes when memories the body had held, suppressed through exhaustion, begin to surface through the protection of unconsciousness. "The beast," he whispered, in a voice carrying a primordial terror that no amount of experience can entirely suppress, because it belongs to the oldest layer of the human nervous system, anterior to language and to reason. There was a beast from the waters. The account of the terror in the depths. What the beast had done to the crew was not simply to terrify them, it was to judge them, and the judgment had lasted 3 days. The gray-bearded sailor sank back against the ship's mast with that quality of sinking belonging to those who realize their legs can no longer be trusted to support them in the face of certain memories. "It began on the first night after you departed," he said, his voice gaining strength as he committed to the telling, as though narrating were also a form of processing, and processing were necessary before they could move forward. "We were keeping the normal watch, rotating shifts as always, and then around midnight we heard the first blow. It was not the sound of something accidentally grazing the hull. It was a deliberate, controlled impact coming from below with a force calculated to cause alarm without causing immediate damage." He closed his eyes, mentally reliving that first moment with that specific clarity of memories that terror engraves in immutable detail, as though the mind had decided this must be preserved with absolute fidelity, regardless of the cost of carrying it. "We ran to the railings, gripping harpoons and spears, but the waters of Thule are dark even under starlight, and all we could glimpse were shadows, shadows so massive they made the ship seem small." Another sailor took up the account, a young man whose age had not had time to prepare him for the specific category of terror that certain depths reserve for those who disturb them. The shadows moved with an intelligence and purpose that no common fish or whale would ever demonstrate. Then came the second blow, stronger, and then a third, establishing a rhythm that would continue for 3 full days. Strike after strike, always forceful enough to keep us in a state of constant alert, but never forceful enough to breach the hull or cause serious structural damage. He paused, searching for adequate words for a concept difficult to articulate without appearing to have lost his mind. It was as though the creature were testing us, evaluating our courage, measuring our psychological endurance in a manner that presupposed not a predator, but an examiner. Helena exchanged a glance with Nivem upon hearing this, both recognizing a familiar pattern. Just as the group that had explored the interior of Thule had been tested through challenging journeys and revelations, the crew that had remained with the ship had also been subjected to their own initiation. The forces governing that paradoxical island permitted no one to visit it without having their character measured. Different trials for different people, but all serving the same fundamental purpose. "The eyes," murmured the older sailor with that trembling which returned whenever that specific memory was accessed. When we could glimpse them briefly, when the creature broke the surface for an instant, they were not the eyes of a fish devoid of intelligence. They were eyes that thought, that observed, that judged. It was like being watched by an ancient and powerful consciousness that saw through all our masks and pretensions down to the true core of who we were. The other sailors nodded, each recognizing in the description their own experience of that gaze that had stripped the soul of its defenses. 3 days of this, without sleeping adequately, without the possibility of relaxing their vigilance for more than moments, hands permanently gripping weapons they knew to be useless against an enemy that fought not on the physical plane, but on the psychological one. Then, on the 3rd day, when they had reached the limit of what they could endure, when some had begun to contemplate the impossible option of simply leaping into the sea to confront the beast directly and put an end to the uncertainty, something had changed. We felt a torpor descend upon us like a heavy and irresistible mantle, the older sailor recounted, searching once again for words to describe what had no parallel in ordinary experience. It was not natural sleep. It was as though some external force had decided the ordeal was complete, that we had been adequately tested, and that we now deserved rest. The beast had judged, and it had found them worthy. The sleep that followed was not punishment, it was approval. Sostratus' mysterious visitor. Sostratus had been waiting for the right moment to speak, letting the sailors complete their accounts first with the patience of those who know that what they have to offer will change everything and that, for precisely that reason, it must not be rushed. While you were facing those challenges on the ship and the others were exploring the island's interior, I also received an interesting visitor, he said, with a curious enthusiasm that contrasted with the somber tone of the accounts concerning the beast from the depths, not because what he had to tell lacked gravity, but because the quality of what he had experienced was genuinely different, as though what had fallen to him was the most unexpected trial of all, the trial of company. I was not entirely alone during my vigil. I had rather pleasant company, a man who emerged from the mist that sometimes rolls down from the mountains toward the coast shortly after darkness had fallen completely. His eyes shone with that memory which had been pleasurable, free of the trauma marking the crew's recollections. He carried a leather satchel well worn from use, the kind that experienced travelers prefer. And when he opened that satchel, he revealed provisions that seemed impossible to find in desolate land. Alexander felt something stir in his chest with that quality of movement that is not merely anticipation, but nascent recognition. The sensation of being on the verge of receiving information that a deeper part of himself already possesses. "Tell us about this visitor," he said, his voice more intense than he had intended, betraying an interest that went well beyond casual curiosity. Sostratus nodded, and the description flowed with the vividness of recent memories, uncorrupted by temporal confusion or mystical sleep. Fresh loaves still warm without an oven to be found for miles, cheeses cured to a perfection requiring months of careful aging, dried fruits of varieties recognized from lands much farther south, fresh game roasted over the fire while the two of them conversed. He was easy to talk to, said Sostrato, with that specific expression of one trying to describe a quality of presence that language was not precisely designed to capture. As though we had known each other for years, as though we were old friends reuniting after a long separation rather than strangers meeting for the first time on a desolate shore at the edge of the known world. Helena leaned slightly forward with that specific attentiveness of those who perceive the outline of something important before the detail that confirms it has been spoken. "What kind of stories did he share?" she asked, her voice soft but charged with the urgency of one seeking to confirm a growing suspicion. Sostrato smiled at the recollection. He spoke of battles, many battles across a long and extraordinary life. He described campaigns and lands some of us have visited, conflicts we have studied in historical chronicles. But he spoke of them not as a scholar who had read of past events. He spoke as a participant who had been there, who had wielded sword and shield, who had watched companions fall. The older sailor, still partially within the account of the beast, raised his eyes with sharpened attention. And then he said something that made me pay particular heed. Sostrato continued, with the specific pause of one who knows that what follows is the most important thing of all. He said that his lineage is native to Amesbury, that some of his descendants had sailed further south and put down roots in other lands, but that the connection to Amesbury remained strong across the generations. And he spoke with particular pride about a grandson who had only recently arrived on the continent, demonstrating a bravery that he had clearly inherited from the family's blood. The silence that followed was of the kind that can be touched. Alexander felt the blood pulsing in his ears, his heart beating with a force that had little to do with physical exertion and everything to do with recognition exploding into consciousness, with the specific force of confirmations that arrive after sufficient time of suspicion for the confirmation to be simultaneously expected and yet still capable of taking the breath away. Helena covered her mouth with her hand, a gesture that was not theatrical but involuntary, the body expressing an astonishment the mind was still processing. Nevem nodded with the slowness of pieces of a cosmic puzzle falling into place. "But here is the most intriguing detail," said Sostrato, entirely unaware of the storm of recognition his words had unleashed. And there was something of poetic perfection in that unawareness. "This man bore an extraordinary resemblance to you, Alexander. The same strong facial structure, the same line of the jaw, the same eyes that seemed to see beyond the surface of things. And throughout our entire conversation, he never once mentioned his own name. He never offered the names of any member of his family. It was as though such information were simultaneously irrelevant and dangerous, as though names carried a power that must be carefully guarded rather than casually distributed." The revelation of the timeless ancestor. Helena's laughter was not mockery. It was the kind that only exists when one comprehends the elegance of something that entirely exceeds any human capacity for planning. It began softly, with that quality of laughter that emerges when admiration grows too great to be contained in the form of simple admiration. Makita joined her quickly, then Amina, whose smile carried the wisdom of one who had long understood that the deepest mysteries reveal themselves in layers, never all at once, and that the elegance with which they reveal themselves is frequently an essential part of what they reveal. Nevem did not laugh, but his eyes shone with that specific light of comprehension that recognizes masterful craftsmanship. Hale closed his eyes in a gesture of silent gratitude, acknowledging the hand of forces that operate on a temporal scale exceeding any human planning. Even Alexander, still processing, felt a smile touch his lips, the smile of someone who has just received confirmation of a truth he had suspected, but not yet dared to believe completely, because the responsibility of believing such a thing is greater than the responsibility of merely suspecting it. Sostrato looked around at his companions with an expression of total confusion, entirely lost as to what had provoked such a reaction. "What is it? What did I say that is so amusing?" The question carried a mixture of genuine perplexity and that mild, specific irritation of being excluded from a joke everyone else understands. Alexander approached and placed both hands on his shoulders, a gesture of fraternity that was also a preparation for a truth that would fundamentally alter Sostratus' understanding of the nature of everything he had experienced beside that fire. My dear brother, the man who visited you was not simply a local inhabitant of Thule. He was, or is, for time appears to hold for him none of the meaning it holds for us, my ancestor. The words came out with that quality of statements that have reached the point where no gentler form of saying them remains, only more or less honest ones, and the most complete honesty sometimes arrives directly. The revelation fell upon Sostratus with that specific quality of truths that arrive so large they take time to land completely, that must be absorbed in layers because no single layer has space enough for the totality of them. Your ancestor? He repeated slowly, testing the words, turning them over in his mind while re-examining the memories of that night beneath a new light. The ancestral warrior you encountered in the grotto when you crossed the temporal veil. The one who guards Excalibur across the centuries, Alexander confirmed. The same. And now we know that he does not exist only in a distant past or on some separate dimensional plane. He can traverse ages, moving through time as we move through space. Thule must be one of the points where the veils between eras are thin enough to permit such crossings. Helena added the perspective that had been forming as she listened. And consider the message he shared with you, Sostratus. He spoke of a grandson who had only recently arrived on the continent, demonstrating a bravery inherited from the family's blood. That grandson is Alexander. The ancestor was speaking of his own descendant across countless generations, recognizing in Alexander the continuation of the lineage he began. But he did so without revealing identities, without breaking open mysteries that were not yet meant to be fully unveiled, offering recognition and blessing disguised as casual conversation about distant family. The elegance of it, the way the ancestor had found a form of being present, of offering provisions and company, of blessing the journey without violating the cosmic protocols that governed such interactions across time, was breathtaking with that specific quality of what exceeds any admiration one could have anticipated feeling. Nevim, taking advantage of the pause that had settled while Sostratus processed, offered druidic context that placed the events within an even vaster frame. In ancient traditions that druids preserve, there exists the concept of eternal guardians, beings who, through extraordinary merit or specific cosmic purpose, transcend the normal limitations of mortal life. They do not become immortal in the sense of simply living forever within the linear current of time, but acquire the capacity to exist at multiple temporal points simultaneously, serving as anchors of continuity across the ages. He looked at Alexander with that specific attentiveness of revelations that have been held in reserve until the one who receives them is ready. Your ancestor, Alexander, appears to be one of these rare guardians. Perhaps his connection to Excalibur, a sword that itself exists outside normal time, granted him this capacity. Or perhaps he always possessed the potential for such transcendence, and Excalibur simply catalyzed the full manifestation of that potential. Sostratus nodded slowly, looking at his own hands as though they belonged to someone who had done something more significant than he had realized while doing it. So, when I was sitting beside that fire, sharing roasted meat and stories beneath the stars, I was in the presence of a being who transcends death, who walks through centuries as we walk through the rooms of a house. Alexander smiled with that subtlety of corrections that do not diminish the humility of the one being corrected, but that honor the truth the humility was obscuring. You are not a simple man, my friend. No one who is part of this journey is simple. Each one was chosen, and the ancestor recognized that in you in the same way he recognizes it in all of us. The departure and reflections at sea. The Aletheia slid away from the coast of Thule with that smoothness that carries the quality of permission, as though the island were gently pressing them back toward the open sea rather than simply allowing them to leave. Alexander remained at the stern for a long time, watching the paradoxical island diminish gradually on the horizon with that quality of contemplation that is not passive but work, the specific work of integrating experiences that had exceeded any scale the available categories had been designed to measure. Part of him felt reluctance to depart, yet he recognized in that reluctance something that deserved to be examined. It was nostalgia for the extraordinary, which is a form of resistance to the return of the ordinary, and the ordinary that awaited them in Amesbury was, he had discovered throughout the journey, precisely where the next chapter of the extraordinary would be written. To leave with gratitude was to honor the generosity of Thule. To attempt to remain beyond the necessary time would be to transgress the hospitality of a place that had its own rules about when visits must end. Helena joined him at the stern, sliding her hand into his with a comfortable familiarity that spoke of deep connection forged not only in shared ordeals, but in repeated choices. The choice to trust, to remain, to honor what had been woven between them through sufficient time for it to have become structure, not merely feeling. "Do you think we will ever fully understand everything that happened there?" she asked, her voice nearly lost in the sound of wind and waves. Alexander considered this with that slowness of answers that do not arrive ready-formed, but are constructed in the moment they are needed. Perhaps complete understanding is not the objective. Perhaps some experiences are meant to remain partially mysterious, preserving that quality of wonder and reverence that reminds us there is far more in the universe than our minds can fully capture or categorize. He paused with the weight of a statement reaching its final form as it was being spoken. What matters is that we were transformed, that each of us now carries gifts and understandings we did not possess before, and that what comes next will require precisely that. In the days that followed, as the Aletheia sailed steadily toward Amesbury, the group spent countless hours sharing and comparing experiences with that quality of sharing that only exists between people who have lived through sufficient intensities for the need to manage the impression they make to have been replaced by the need to simply say what is true. Nevim revealed more about his newly awakened druidic identity, sharing fragments of ancestral knowledge that now flowed through him like a river that had finally found its bed, not forced, not dammed, but following the course that had always been its own. He spoke of the font of memories awaiting them in Amesbury, of that dimensional portal that would be the key to the next phase, of the necessary rituals, of the planetary alignments, of the interior preparations each of them would need to complete before they could attempt to activate the ancient portal. Hale devoted much of his time to working with the crew who were still processing the trauma of the 3 days with the beast, guiding each sailor through the transformative understanding that what they had faced had not been a random attack by an irrational creature. It had been a trial by an intelligence that assessed worthiness, and they had been judged worthy. That recognition transformed traumatic memories into a peculiar pride. They had faced the beast of the depths of Thule and survived. That was an achievement fit to be carried with honor. Sostratus kept close to Alexander during those days, and the two developed that specific fraternity that emerges when people pass through extraordinary experiences together, even when they have lived radically different aspects of them, like two musicians who played the same concerto in different rooms and who, upon meeting, discover that each heard what the other could not, and that together they possess the complete concerto. Sostratus asked questions about Alexander's encounter with the ancestor in the temporal grotto, wanting to compare details with his own interaction beside the fire. And through those comparisons, patterns emerged with that retroactive clarity of things that were always there but only become visible when seen from the correct angle. The ancestor adapted his presentation and communication according to the context and the needs of each person he encountered, but the essence remained consistent. He was a warrior. He was a guardian. He was a bearer of wisdom that transcended individual eras. And he was, above all, a living connection between past and present, an embodied reminder that lineages matter, that blood carries memories and potentials that can sleep for generations before being awakened at the right moment by the right catalysts. Omens and preparations. Alexander gathered the group on deck on a night of particular stellar clarity, when the sea lay calm as a mirror reflecting the cosmos, and the circle that formed was different from all previous circles, not merely people seated together, but a brotherhood recognizing itself. "We need to acknowledge something important," he began, his voice carrying that solemnity which is not performance, but the weight of a truth arriving at the right moment to be spoken. "We are no longer simply a group of individuals sharing the common objective of finding Excalibur. Through the ordeals and transformations of Thule, we have become something more. A sacred brotherhood, a circle of the chosen, united not merely by purpose, but by bonds forged in the fire of mystical initiation." He looked at each face illuminated by starlight with the attentiveness of those who want every person present to know they are being fully seen. Each of us has brought unique gifts to this circle, and each of us has been transformed through our interactions with all the others. We are stronger together than the sum of our individual parts. Nevam responded with that authority that comes not from social position, but from connection with traditions that transcend individual civilizations. What emerged among us in Thule is not merely a convenient alliance. It is what the ancients called soul companionship, the recognition that our individual journeys are threads of a greater tapestry being woven by hands that operate on cosmic scales. Helena felt the truth in Nevam's words, resonating with that resonance of things that confirm what one already knew without knowing one knew it. And we must also acknowledge that the journey is far from over. Thule was preparation, was initiation, was the awakening of potentials we will need when the real challenges emerge. Excalibur is not yet in our hands. The font of memories still awaits activation. And beyond these immediate tasks, she paused with the weight of one who holds a vision that cannot yet be fully shared. There are greater destinies unfolding that we have only begun to glimpse through visions and omens. Makita, whose Wiccan sensitivity had begun to reveal currents of energy and intention flowing through the group the way scent detects its source before the eyes can see it, added, "I sense that when we activate the font of memories and bring Excalibur through the temporal veils, we will not merely be recovering a lost object, but initiating something far greater. The sword as a key that opens a door to an entirely new phase, not only our individual evolution, but something that will affect many lives, many generations." She looked specifically at Alexander and Helena. "And I sense that the two of you, more than any of us, carry the special weight of that destiny." Amina, always more observant and less vocal than her daughter, broke her silence with that specific quality of speech that arrives after long processing and which, for that reason, arrives more distilled, more precise. "During the years I spent guarding Makita from the shadows, I learned much about patience, about allowing things to unfold in their own divine time rather than forcing premature revelations. And now I feel that we are at a delicate moment where that patience is a crucial virtue. There is urgency in our mission, yes, but there is also wisdom in not rushing, in allowing each preparation to be completed properly before we advance to the next step. Rituals performed precipitously can result in consequences we would prefer to avoid." Hale added what his perceptions of the celestial hosts revealed, with that specific caution of those who possess sight that exceeds the sight of others and who know that saying too much can be as problematic as saying too little. "The forces that observe and guide events on the material plane are attentive, focused upon us in a manner that suggests what we do in the coming days carries implications far beyond our individual understandings. There is a sense of expectation, of silent encouragement toward our success, but also subtle warnings against arrogance. We are important to a greater plan, yes, but we are not irreplaceable. Should we fail, others will be called, but failure would carry a cost, temporal, emotional, karmic, that we would prefer not to incur. Sostratus, with that practicality that was his specific form of love for what was real and important, brought the conversation back to the ground of concrete action. Then what is the next step when we disembark in Amesbury? Where exactly is the font of memories located? What physical preparations, beyond the spiritual ones, do we need to make? Nevim welcomed the questions with the recognition of one who knows that mystical journeys truly fail when practical preparation is neglected in the name of spiritual elevation. The font of memories is located in a sacred grove approximately half a day's walk from Amesbury, far enough to be protected from common disturbances, yet close enough to be accessible when needed. The grove is concealed by protective veils that I maintain through my druidic vigilance, but with all of you now awakened to deeper realities, you should be able to perceive and pass through those veils without difficulty. He paused with that quality of pause that orders what follows by degree of importance. As for material preparations, we will need specific crystals, particular herbs, appropriate offerings. But more important than any material preparation is the interior one. Each person must enter into a state of mental clarity and intentional purity, because what the font will reflect in each of us is not what we attempt to be, it is what we are. Return to Amesbury and the promise of what is to come. The familiar coast of Amesbury rose on the horizon with that quality of appearances that are simultaneously return and arrival, because the person who returns is not the same one who departed, and the place that receives them must learn to recognize someone who is at once familiar and new. The final days of sailing had passed in a peculiar mixture of growing anticipation and contemplative stillness. The specific state of those who await the moment of a trial they know to be inevitable, and which, for that very reason, no longer causes anxiety in the sense of fear of the unknown, but rather the concentrated tension of those who are preparing to give everything they have. Alexander spent long hours practicing the vibration he had learned in the temporal grotto with that awareness that he was training not a physical muscle, but a capacity for being. The sacred frequency that resonated with the essence of Excalibur, which needed to be available instantaneously when the moment arrived, without hesitation or effort. Helena contemplated the vision she had received of the future descendant, still guarding its deepest details with that wisdom of revelations that must await the moment when they can be fully received by those who receive them. At times, she found Alexander watching her with a questioning expression, clearly perceiving that she held something, and he always respected her choice to keep certain knowledge private until the appropriate moment arrived, with the nature of moments that come when they are ready, not when they are forced. The disembarkation in Amesbury brought an emotional surprise. Edith waited on the shore with that anticipation of those who had waited long enough for the waiting itself to have become its own form of presence, always looking toward the horizon, always expecting the sail that had promised to return. Before the boats had fully touched the water, Helena was already moving to disembark with that specific urgency of one who has seen the person they needed to see before any other. And the embrace she exchanged with Edith carried everything the months of journey had not permitted to be said directly. Alexander thanked Edith with that gratitude that goes beyond words, because all available words are insufficient for the weight of what is felt. Gratitude for everything she had done for him, for Helena, for all who were returning transformed. Nevim immediately began making arrangements for the expedition to the sacred grove, sending messages through druidic channels with the calibrated urgency of one who knows that a window of ideal time exists for certain rituals, and that this window was opening. On that first night back in Amesbury, the group gathered in the spacious room of a discreet inn. a fire crackling in the hearth with that comforting familiarity of fire that is simply fire, obeying the physical laws it should obey, without mystical intensity or purpose beyond warmth. There was something profoundly reassuring in that after Thule. Alexander looked around at each face illuminated by the firelight, feeling deep gratitude for these companions who had become far more than allies, a chosen family, a brotherhood, forged not through blood but through ordeals that had revealed what blood alone could never have revealed. "We stand at the threshold," said Nevum, breaking the contemplative silence with that druidic authority that had become increasingly pronounced since the sacred waters. Thule prepared us, awakened potentials that lay dormant, revealed truths we needed to understand before we could advance. But preparation, however deep, is only a prelude to real action. His voice carried both anticipation and warning, the specific warning of those who seek not to create fear, but respect for the magnitude of what is being attempted. In a few days, when the moon is in its appropriate phase and the planetary alignments favor our work, we will go to the font of memories. There, we will attempt to activate a dimensional portal that has not been opened for generations. And if we succeed, Alexander will have the opportunity to use the vibration he learned to call Excalibur across the centuries. Helena felt a premonition pass through her consciousness with the quality of premonitions that are not complete visions, but glimpses. A fan of possibilities unfolding before her like cards being revealed one by one, each slightly altering what is understood about the others. She saw success and she saw failure. She saw paths diverging in multiple directions depending on choices not yet made. "We must be prepared," she said softly, "for the possibility that the font of memories will reveal more than simply the path to recovering Excalibur. Places of power such as this frequently serve multiple purposes, offer multiple revelations to those prepared to receive them. Each of us may find something different there, unique challenges, unique gifts, unique truths we need to integrate before we can truly fulfill the destinies that await." The group agreed in that silence with that specific accord of people who no longer require voting or debate to align themselves, who have learned through sufficient ordeals that alignment emerges when intention is genuine and purpose is shared. When they finally withdrew to rest after days of sailing, each carried with them that specific sensation of standing at an inflection point, the moment where everything that came before was preparation, and everything that comes after will be the realization of that for which the preparation existed. The air of Amesbury felt charged with expectation that was almost physical, the quality of air before a storm, but without the threat, only the potential, the tension of something immense about to arrive. And in the dreams of that night, each member of the group received their own visions and omens with that characteristic of messages that arrive when consciousness is sufficiently quiet to receive them. Some comforting, others challenging, but all confirming that the path ahead, though uncertain in its specific details, was the right path. The journey toward Excalibur continued, and the font of memories awaited, to reveal the next layer of mysteries that would transform not only their individual lives, but the fabric of the destiny that awaited them, and that awaited through them generations not yet in existence, but who would need what was being seeded now, on this night, in this city, in this circle of the chosen who had traveled to the edge of the known world and returned carrying something that appeared on no map, yet was more real than any land any map had ever recorded. In the next episode, the font of memories in Amesbury lies half a day's walk away, and every step of that walk will be unlike any step any of them has ever taken, because they walk now not as seekers departing into the unknown, but as the chosen advancing toward what was prepared so that they might arrive at it. Nevum will lead the group through the protective veils of the sacred grove with the authority of a druid who at last fully inhabits what he has always been. Alexander will enter that dimensional portal, carrying the resonance learned in the chamber outside of time. That frequency, which when fully inhabited, renders the separation between seeker and sought simply unreal. Helena will carry the vision of the distant descendant she cannot yet fully share, but which guides every choice she makes before the choice is even consciously articulated. And when the moment arrives, when the conditions align, when Alexander is in a state of perfect resonance, when the font recognizes in that specific blood the echo of the warrior who guarded the sword, he will speak the sacred name, Excalibur. And what answers that call will not simply be a sword crossing time. It will be the confirmation that everything that was sacrificed, everything that was learned, everything that was transformed throughout a journey that began long before any of them knew there was a journey to be made, was exactly enough.